How the heck do you know that? I'm a fan of accumulating dangerous knowledge, so I'm probably on pretty much every watch list ever by now. Don't try any of these at home. Most of the stuff that's in the Anarchist cookbook is actually complete bunkum. Some of the explosive recipes are kind of semi-valid, but there's no mention of safety protocols, so you're likely to blow stuff up. There's a genuine conspiracy theory that the cookbook is actually a false flag intended to convince real extremists to accidentally sabotage themselves while trying to make homemade ones. A single round of half-power 22 long rifle is just enough energy to enter a hard surface, but not enough to get back out again. The minimal mess is very quiet, as gunshots go, and the wound is almost unnoticeable at a glance. The KGB was apparently fond of this one. When making a Molotov cocktail, dissolving styrofoam or melting tar or tire rubber into the gasoline makes it much stickier. Also, the original Finnish military-issue cocktails didn't use a rag. They used a storm match stuck to the outside of the bottle with tape, since that would apparently result in more reliable ignition. You can make nitroglycerin by taking a 1-to-1 mixture of sulfuric acid and nitric acid and slowly adding glycerin with a dropper. If you got too fast, it'll start to bubble, and that's a very bad thing. Carefully soak it in wood pulp and/or diatomaceous earth to make dynamite, which is much safer and easier to handle than straight nitroglycerin, though it's still not foolproof. If you own an SLR, semi-automatic version of the FN/FAL battle rifle, there's a way to insert a matchstick into the trigger group to convert it to fully automatic fire by preventing the disconnector from tripping. I don't remember exactly how, but Anzac troops in the Vietnam War were known to do it as part of the process for making a witch gun, sawn-off automatic SLR. The Millwall brick is a sort of improvised mace made famous by British football hooligans. You made it by folding a newspaper over and over again until it becomes what amounts to a solid block of compressed paper. Those electronic road signs, the ones that usually warn drivers about road work ahead or something, can usually be reprogrammed with the default password dots. If the password has been changed, most of them can also be reset with the override password DIPY. Most fireproof safes actually achieve their fireproofing via a layer of what amounts to cement on the inside. Burn through the outer layers with thermite, chisel through the cement, and you can cut right through the inner plastic liner without difficulty. Glycerin and potassium permanganate can be used to start fires. They will spontaneously generate heat when mixed. You can make surprisingly effective body armor by duct taping books over your chest with ceramic tiles on top of them. They work against everything, from sharp objects to rubber bullets, though all bets are off if real bullets are involved. Thermite is 3 parts aluminum powder, 8 parts red iron oxide, powdered rust. It takes quite a bit of heat to ignite. Ideally, you'd use something like a magnesium strip to get it going. And once the reaction is started, it will burn and can't easily be put out since it includes its own oxidizer. The original Vauxhall Nova had an engineering flaw whereby it could be started without a key in the ignition by removing the emergency light button, reinserting it upside down, pressing it to turn on the ignition, and then push starting the car. Yes, this only starts the engine. It does not actually disable any of the other anti-theft features. A surprisingly effective smoke mixture can be made with 3 parts potassium nitrate and 2 parts granulated sugar. Stirred together over low heat, ideally in a hot plate instead of an open flame for obvious reasons. You'll know it's done when it starts to look like peanut butter. Take it off the heat or it will start to burn. Pour it out, mold into the shape you want before it solidifies, and then add some kind of fuse or wick to light it with to make a simple smoke bomb. Don't hold it in your hand while it's lit, by the way. And the scariest part of all this is that this is all Googleable. Story 2. My autism isn't quite sure how to respond to this since I have like a million such facts swimming around in my brain. My partner uses this when we have pool parties. Ask him about music. Anyway, since I'm old, I've had so many special interests by this point that it's ridiculous. I'm a walking encyclopedia of a bunch of stuff. Random musical facts. The guitarist Steve Stevens is at the center of a ton of amazing music and was everywhere in the 1980s. This is a rabbit hole. Number 1. He wrote most of the music with and for Billy Idol and also played most of the instruments. Number 2. He released a couple of flamenco albums since he was more influenced by acoustic music at first. One of those includes a flamenco tribute to Randy Rhoads. Number 3. There are amazing flamenco songs in many of the collaborations he does. The Bozio 11 Stevens supergroup, for example, released Duende off the first album and Tzigane off the second. Number 4. Another example is that in the 1980s, after being told he can make it without Billy Idol, he released an album with the Atomic Playboys, with cover art by H.R. Geiger, who had done ELP's album art and inspired the Alien movies, including the great flamenco song Run Across Desert Sands. Number 5. That AP album was executive produced by Ted Templeman, who also did most of Van Halen's early work and was the one who put him on the track Dirty Diana with Michael Jackson, having already worked with guitarist Eddie Van Halen and Steve Lukather for other famous tracks. Number 6, the combo of Terry Bozzio, Steve Stevens, and Tony Levin, just one of his many collaborations, is a very underrated supergroup made of people who have played in some of the most famous albums of all time. Tony Levin alone has been featured in over 500 albums. It's incredible. If you've ever seen King Crimson play live with 6 guitarists and 2 drummers, it's unreal. Terry Bozzio is maybe one of the greatest drummers who's ever lived. If you listen to Duende, you'll see what I mean. He needs a Guinness record for his drum set. He also played in a song with Korn, I Will Protect You, shown here in full flight in that astounding drum kit. Terry Bozzio used to play with Frank Zappa, 26 albums, and has a ton of solo drum stuff, including a piece Frank Zappa wrote for drums as a challenge to drummers called The Black Page, which is nearly impossible to play. Number 7, Steve did the Top Gun theme with Harold Faltermeyer, who later did the Beverly Hills Cop stuff in XLF. He won a Grammy for that. Number 8, he's the husband of a woman who was on the Married to Rock TV show. There are so many other connectors to progressive metal bands that I just have to stop at some point. I could seriously keep going beyond all reason. Story 3. I have a lot, so buckle up. Number 1. If you plan on using a baseball bat as a weapon, put a long sock over the end. When someone tries to grab the bat, you can rip it away with ease. Number 2. The fact that mushrooms are more genetically related to humans than they are to trees. Number 3. The terminal velocity of an ant is around 3.9 miles per hour. They can't be harmed by falling because they can't fall fast enough to hurt themselves. Number 4. Tarantulas taste like shrimp. I told this once to a random stranger because they brought up how they didn't like shrimp. They immediately hounded me about how I knew this. Now I never ate a tarantula. Number 5. Mount Kilimanjaro is the tallest mountain with cell service. Those fake roses that come inside a glass tube at gas stations aren't pretty decorations. They're paraphernalia. Number 7. A Russian woman had a ton of triplets, twins, and quadruplets with the same man, totaling up to 69 children. Number 8. The tag in a fitted sheet always goes on the right bottom corner from the perspective of standing at the foot of the bed. Number 9. A 2008 Prius can float, at least for short distances. The car was not damaged in any way. Number 10. Owls have tube-shaped eyes rather than spherical ones. This makes it difficult to move the eyes in their sockets, but it is counteracted by the ability to rotate their heads 270 degrees in either direction. Number 11. A human tooth has 36 calories. Number 12. In ancient Babylon, people would stuff their most valuable possessions, fine wine among others, into the walls of their basement, which in the region was usually a naturally occurring cave. So when the taxman came, he couldn't see it to count it. How do you know all that? Story 4. Here's a bunch of fun archaeology facts. Biting through a carrot in a digit requires the same amount of pressure. If you find a rock and wonder if it's bone, lick it. If it sticks to your tongue, it's bone. Don't actually lick, there's a risk of disease. Ancient Greece produced a huge amount of olive oil, partly for consumption and mainly for physical relations. I'm not 100% sure if this one was disproven recently. The ancient Romans used clay discs on sticks when they couldn't get sponges to wipe their bums. These often included images and names of those they wished to curse. Bonus, linen producers would pay Romans to do their business into containers to use them to bleach linen. Caesar dressing stems from garum, a Roman fish sauce. It's created by collecting small fish, usually sardines, putting them in a bucket with salt water and spices, and letting them ferment for weeks. Authentic Caesar dressing has a fishy taste due to sardine juice. Indigenous peoples from North America and Siberia often have skulls missing canine teeth and have 2 small infused platelets at the back and either side of where the skull fits in the spine. Theirs are the only skulls where race can be identified. Toys were used in ancient Egypt. They were wooden or ceramic tubes filled with bees. Caligula loved his horse so much, and was also crazy, that he named him praetor in the Roman government. The Romans had automatons, basically early machines that were steam-powered. One of the colossi, massive statues usually in harbors, was recorded as being an automaton. The Romans were pretty dang close to developing coal power. They just couldn't find a big enough source of it to consistently use it. Roman cement is still superior to what we have today, although if I recall correctly, they just figured out the recipe recently. Non-archaeology facts. Horses don't have gallbladders. Your heart and brain generate an electromagnetic field. Most people can sense this and the changes in it, i.e. emotional changes. Horses can sense it from over 8 feet away. Story 5. I know a lot of stupid random things. My grandpa buys me these books of random knowledge for every holiday. A couple off the top of my head. Ludolf Van Collen's life's work was to calculate the mathematical constant pi to 35 digits. He died in 1610 and had the 35 digits of pi engraved on his tombstone because he was so proud of his achievement. Mummy brown was a paint color used by artists that contained actual mummies. Bone growths have been found in Egyptian mummies, but so far none in other internal organs have been found. Actor Dolph Lundgren, Ivan Drago in Rocky IV and in a ton of other action films, is super smart. He has a master's degree in chemical engineering and received a Fulbright scholarship to MIT, but left school to become an actor. The Great Molasses Flood was an incident in Boston in 1919 when a large storage tank with approximately 2.3 million gallons of molasses broke open. The resultant wave of molasses swept down the streets at about 35 miles per hour, taking out 21 people and injuring 150. For decades afterward, residents of the area claimed you could still smell molasses on hot days. The best April Fool's Day prank in sports history. In 1985, the Sid Finch hoax was created as an elaborate prank that was printed in Sports Illustrated magazine. The eagle in the U.S. Great Seal faces the olive branch in its right talon, but until 1945, it faced the arrow's clutch to its left. The middle initial in Harry S. Truman's name doesn't actually stand for anything. His parents couldn't decide on the middle name. On Canadian radio and TV, there's a law that says 1 in every 5 songs used has to be from Canadian talent. This helps prevent Canadian songs and bands from being passed over for popular American songs. Story 6. Born and raised in the Philippines, there's not much that can make people say, "And why the heck do you know that?" But I remember what I did once that made people react as such. It was in senior high. I was in my second year when we had chemistry class, and there was a storeroom that had everything needed for chemistry-related lab activities. I found 3 items in a large jar container, along with different compounds and materials. Saltpeter, sulfur, and finely crushed charcoal are next to a jar of large chunks of charcoal. We were tasked with making something. I can't remember, it's been years, without the need for notes or instructions. A few of my classmates made things like rising mercury in a glass tube thingy, thermite reactions, copper and nitric acid, etc. I made gunpowder. The professor asked what I made, because when I was done, I was making something like a small Derringer-sized gun intended for blank firing using small metal tubing, a wooden handle, and a trigger that lowers a lit matchstick to the hole to burn the black powder. I said to the professor, "I made black powder." Just like that, without hesitation. The professor didn't know what black powder is because it's not a common word used here in the Philippines. So what I did was make an aluminum ball as the bullet, load the little DIY Derringer with gunpowder, and stuff the aluminum ball down the barrel. What happened next was that I tied the matchstick to the hammer, lit it, then aimed outside the window and pulled the trigger till it fired. It freaked everyone out, making everyone, even the professor, ask why I know how to make gunpowder. Story 7. A comma, or more specifically the lack thereof, cost thousands of elderly and disabled individuals thousands of dollars or prevented them from getting medical care in the 2000s and 2010s in the US. The Oxford comma is a comma placed immediately after the penultimate term in a series of 3 or more terms. It is not necessary to be grammatically correct, but it can lead to ambiguous interpretations of certain sentences. In this particular example, the U.S. Congress ratified a Medicare law around 1999 that stipulated each person is entitled to X amount of dollars to cover occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech therapy. It was supposed to mean that there were 3 separate amounts that could be applied to each service separately, with the funds resetting with the calendar year. But because there was no comma between speech therapy and physical therapy, those services were forced to share the same pool of funds. This means that the individual who needed both services, like a stroke patient, would burn through those funds twice as fast. To make this worse, back then, the law stipulated a hard cap on these funds. When you're out, too bad, so sad. The hard cap has since been repealed, but the comma issue was never fixed. Now they just have to do a lot of extra paperwork to get these services covered. The crazy thing is, this all happened because some dumb intern on Capitol Hill in the 90s made a typo or simply didn't know better because they didn't pay attention in high school English. Damn, it's not just memes and jokes that are coming from the lack of Oxford commas. Such a small thing to cause a lot of damage, huh? Speaking of small things, do me a favor and like and subscribe so you won't miss out on future uploads. Trust me, you're in for more mind-blowing content like this one. Story 8. An ear infection left untreated can grow and persist for years on end, slowly affecting your ear canal. If left untreated long enough, the erosion causes skin cells in your ear that are unable to escape, so they build up into a benign growth called a cholesteatoma. Left untreated, this can grow and affect balance and facial movement, eventually leading to an infection. Cholesteatomas can also occur spontaneously without any infections. I've had 2 removed. The second one was wrapped around my facial nerve and caused damage similar to Bell's palsy. I now have balance issues and am mostly deaf in that ear due to the fact that, although cholesteatomas consist of just cholesterol and skin cells, they can affect bone. I lost my stapes, incus, and some of the surrounding bone. I would never have known I had anything wrong the first time, but my dog, a GSD, wouldn't stop sticking his nose in my ear. I finally figured out that he was trying to tell me something. The second time, 4 years later, the same reaction, different GSD. That time I didn't wait. I got an appointment with my ENT right away. Story 9. If you fly a lot and want to be an a-hole and never pay for a drink or food while in the air, use a credit card that is deactivated and declines. The Wi-Fi in the air doesn't pick it up until it's processed a few days later. Literally, you can do this every time. Pro tip, make sure the date in the card hasn't expired and it's free cabs and whiskey the entire plane ride. Every single time. I used to date a flight attendant. It's pretty common knowledge. I also worked for 8 years in the corporate office. The simple fact is that logistically, it's just too much of a hassle to go after people for a few drinks and a snack box. We literally just don't care. Aviation is a tricky business, and we really only care about safety and on-time arrivals in addition to weather. We deal too much with cancellations and late arrivals to give a damn about someone who didn't pay for a glass of wine. Also, flight attendants just give stuff away to people they know and employees who are flying off the clock in general. It's just standard knowledge. Again, I'm not advocating, but it's a thing. Wow, what an unethical life tip. Story 10. Half of all bank robberies take place on Friday. I'm a banker in 2 of my last 3 branches. I was in charge of ordering and handling cash shipments. When I came into one branch on Wednesday and into another on Thursday. At one branch, we had more cash before the shipment because we took in so much from our business customers and then shipped it out each week. We would often get rid of $300,000 plus. The other branch was really slow, so right after we got our shipment was when we had our most, usually around $120,000. Friday is probably a good day to rob a bank, not because they have a lot of money, but because they're busy. Tellers are going to be distracted, tired, and potentially off their game. There's so many people, it's probably harder to remember faces and stuff. Regardless of how much cash is on hand, if the teller is on the ball, you likely won't get more than $2,000 or $5,000 in the very top end, depending on the bank, the branch, and the teller. Duly noted. Guess I know what my buddies and I are doing on Friday. Story 11. Blue crabs will eat anything within a few days. This is true for all crabs, really. They're bottom feeders, and a main component of their diet is miscellaneous detritus they come across on the seafloor and on shorelines. Coconut crabs, in general, are basically spiders with shells, as they can climb trees at other angles. They also have incredibly diverse appetites and incredibly strong bite power. If somebody washes up on a deserted island, chances are that when they pass away, coconut crabs are the reason why they won't ever be found. They eat everything, even thin metal. They also have a little advantage. Their shells are durable and hard to break, and they contain little edible meat. If you see one, back away from it. If it's somewhere avoidable, like on a beach, go to another sea. If it's somewhere like right outside your house, call professional exterminators. Story 12. German U-boats in World War II had technicians charged with flushing the toilet after every crew member did their thing. The toilets were so complex because they had to flush out waste into a high-pressure underwater environment without letting any water into the sub. There was a whole manual just about flushing. Bonus fact, after the captain of one U-1206 did the number 2 one day, he decided he could figure out the flushing on his own by following the manual. It did not go well. He turned the valves in the wrong order and water started flooding into the sub's battery chamber. The water reacted with the batteries to produce chlorine gas, and the panicked captain ordered a ship to surface. As soon as they did, a British patrol discovered and captured them. The U-boat sank, and the survivors, including the captain, were taken to Scotland, where they spent the remainder of the war as POWs. Story 13. Getting a job that pays $100,000 a year is not only very attainable but also super easy to find. In fact, industries and governments actively promote them. I only learned this in the past few years because I was never exposed to trades, and I know this is true for a large portion of people. I ended up with a ton of student loans and job prospects that didn't match expectations. I got into rebar with my local union, and in a year with 1 week training, I make the same as a nurse. But I have set hours, overtime is double time, great pension, great benefits, and I work out all day. And it's definitely hard as hell. But hey, getting off at 2:45 allows me a great work-life balance. Story 14. Oh man, do I have a list of facts about snakes for you. Garter snake hearts keep beating for quite a while after they pass away. One snake will inevitably absorb the other one unless the food breaks or you stop them. Male boas still possess visible portions of their legs in the form of spurs, which they use during mating. They feel really weird when you get poked by them. There's a parasite that has garter snakes as an end host, so they build up at the end of a snake's tail. Hold up there. That's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to crazy things people actually know. Want to hear more awesome facts that'll have you questioning everything? Check out What's a Ridiculous Fact You Know next, because Story 3 is a blast. See you there.